Good day, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kallestofeles, and I thought I'd make a video about the Steam controller, which I received on the 10th of November. I actually would have received it on the 9th, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, I wasn't able to retrieve it at that point. So, as of recording this, I have had a couple of days already with the Steam controller, and to sum it up, it has been an excellent experience overall. This is what we have been waiting for, at least what I have been waiting for. It's a perfect, I don't know, it lands somewhere between the Xbox controller and the keyboard and mouse. Definitely it is not a replacement for keyboard and mouse, but it is damn close. You can play almost any game with the Steam controller. And let me tell you, it works better. A whole lot better than the Xbox controller. Well, here it is, the Steam controller. Let's go over the basics first, and then we're going to get into some more advanced stuff. So, what you get are dual trackpads. Work great. One of them has this indent of a cross. This can function as a D-pad, or is more meant to function as a D-pad, I guess. But please note that this actually has only one button. It does not have directional buttons. It uses the touch-sensitive interface to recognize where you press, but the click is click. It is always the middle click that actually works. So basically, those touchpads both have one click to them. They don't have multiple, 4 directions or 8 directions or anything. It just uses your finger placement to recognize where you make the click. You also get your select and start buttons, and obviously the big Steam logo to turn the damn thing on. Let me just switch it back off. You need to hold it, you need to just press it to turn it on, but you need to hold it for about, 5-6 seconds to switch it back off. You get one analog stick. It is rather nice, I must say. I haven't had any issues with it. Now, I was previously using an Xbox 360 like controller, Logitech Chillstream, which had the exact same layout and used the same drivers. But I was really used to that controller. But with this Steam controller, my main concern was that, as this placement is all different, I really hate the way PlayStation has its analog stick placement. So I was very worried about this. But I must say it works out great. You get your A, B, X, Y buttons. Now, a little tiny rant. This controller, some reviewers say that this is of poor quality. It feels light and really poor quality build overall. But it's not the case. This is an excellent build quality. And, here in Estonia, we get it for 60 euros to get this thing shipped. And for that money, it's perfect. Now, what I do have a small problem with is these A, B, X, Y buttons. And it's not that they're small. I can overlook that. The same actually goes for those 2 start and select buttons. They are actually so, how to put it, they're so low. They're not exactly very high above the surface. So when you actually start clicking those, now that feels kind of cheap. Now this is one rant that I have with the controller. Everything else is fucking perfect. Okay, so we have those. Let's turn this thing around. So you have your dual stage triggers. You go and let me get a better angle. So the dual stage triggers have this one analog stage, which you can pull, and then you can actually make a final push, which is a digital click. Now you can mess around with it. They advertise it as such that you can, with all your FPS games, you can just use the analog pull to aim down the iron sight, and then a final pull to actually pull the trigger of a gun and fire it off. But I don't know. I haven't played around with that feature so much. I don't know. It seems kind of gimmicky, but it might work out fine for you if you have enough experience with this. You have your two bumpers, left and right bumper, and you also get these paddles. By default, they default to A and X buttons on your controller, but you can map everything around on this controller, and this is the big thing about this controller. What you also get, which people sometimes forget to mention, is that this controller has a gyroscope in it, or a gyro accelerometer, which means that basically when you turn your controller around, you can set it that it actually moves the mouse cursor on the screen, which in FPS games makes a whole lot of difference between getting that kill and not. Now, I'm not a great FPS fanboy, but I do play some games. And even in a game like Alien Isolation, I use the right touchpad to quickly move around my screen. And then when I'm approximately at, let's say that there's an alien, right? You use your flamethrower, I get the approximate location of the alien, and as I hold my finger simply on this pad, I can then fine aim with this gyroscope to the alien, and then boom, shoot it. It works out perfectly, and in games like Spec Ops The Line, it works great. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's not a gimmick. That's the main thing. The Valve didn't exactly advertise this gyro much, but it does make a whole lot of difference. Check out the videos on YouTube where people are using the gyros, getting first place in a lobby of CS:GO. So it does make a huge difference, and I strongly suggest people test this out and use it. So that pretty much covers up the basics. I'm not gonna tell you about the batteries and such. Everything has been covered by other people already. Of course, your analog stick also has the click. And that's pretty much it about the basics. So let's go to setting the damn thing up. Now, to set up the Steam controller, it doesn't take much if you're using Windows. You just boot up Windows, start Steam, go into big picture mode, activate the controller, and boom, you will get the firmware update. Apply the update and you're basically good to go. Now, in SteamOS, the same thing applies. You don't need to do anything else. However, if you're using a Linux distribution and you're actually running Steam through that, then there are a couple of tweaks. Now, thing to keep in mind is I am using Manjaro Linux, which is an Arch-based distribution. Basically, the same rules will apply to any Ubuntu, though the command line commands might differ a bit. So just keep that in mind. But if you're already into Linux, then I'm sure you can either look up the equivalent commands for your distribution on the Google. So let's begin. So if you're going from an Arch-based distribution, first thing we need to do is to get the Steam controller's UDEV rule set. You can do it manually, but the absolute easiest way to do it is to simply get the UDEV rules from the AUR repository. So you can use either Yort to get the UDEV rules, or I prefer to use Packer. This is simply up to your preference, which ones do you wish to use. So just go through the installation. And after the installation is done, please make sure that all the users that will be running Steam on Big Picture using the Steam controller will be added to the Steam group. This is necessary. You must do it, and the command differs by the distribution. And now, the other thing to keep in mind after we've added the user to the group is to check on etc x11 xorg.conf.d that you have 50-joystick.conf file there. If you don't, simply pause the video, create that file, and you would be good to go. Now, in that file, what we are looking for are the options StartKeysEnabled and option StartMouseEnabled. They must be set to false. Otherwise, what will happen is that whenever your Steam controller is switched on, your mouse cursor will actually go to the top of the screen. And after you've added those rules, just start up Steam in Big Picture and switch on your controller. You will be prompted for a firmware upgrade. I was not prompted as I have already this whole thing set up and updated. Just a note, when you first do this, go to the controller testing and simply go through the Steam controller support. This is just to make sure that everything is working as expected. You don't have any faults on your controller's hardware. Just to make sure that everything is ready for you to start gaming. Now, once you have the controller set up, initially that the Steam Big Picture works for you, there's one thing to keep in mind that very many reviewers miss. It's the whole purpose of the Steam controller, at least the way I see it. It is not a controller that you plug in, you go into your game, everything works right out of the box like a 360 controller, only with the touchpads.
There's gotta be another way inside.
It is not like that. This controller is more like a blank slate. A template, if you will, for a controller. It gives you the features, but you really have to go into the configuration which Big Picture offers, which are very sleek configuration screens. And you really need to tweak it per game. So whenever you get a new game that you wish to use this controller for, you will need to set up the controls accordingly. Now, it supports keyboard and mouse controls, it supports the controllers like 360 layouts, and a mixture of two. But it is really important that you keep in mind that you don't go into the game and expecting everything to work right out of the box. This is not the kind of controller. Now, for an example, the developers can make their own presets for the controller. Alien Isolation was one of those, and they didn't work out for me at all. The general layout was great. It mapped Xbox 360's controls one-to-one, basically. But the issue is that the right touchpad will have to emulate one-to-one mapping to the joystick. You can use it as a mouse, the way you would use a mouse or a trackpad. But it would emulate the joystick move in the game. In theory, it works out perfectly. However, in reality, what happens is that I don't know how. There's gotta be something wrong with the Alien Isolation code itself. Because when you move your mouse slightly, very slowly on the touchpad, it makes like a full 180-degree turn. And when you swipe your finger quickly on the touchpad, then it actually makes very, very slow movements. So it's opposite. It shouldn't behave like that. And in other games, it doesn't. I tested it out with Spec Ops The Line. It works just fine. But for some reason this configuration on Alien Isolation just doesn't work. So what I did was I set the right trackpad as a mouse input. Now this works perfectly, and you can set up the gyro as well on it. But the issue comes when there are certain puzzles in the game which require right joystick input and the left joystick input. But as you set the right trackpad to mouse, then you don't have the right joystick input that the game needs for the puzzles. So what I did for a workaround is nice. It's mode shifting, and what I did was I configured the controller so that whenever I press down on the left trackpad, the right trackpad will actually emulate joystick. So whenever I need to do a right joystick move in a puzzle, I simply hold down the left trackpad and move the right trackpad. So this works out just fine. It's great. Now, besides those templates that the developers can make, there are a whole bunch of community templates already out for majority of games. So there are people like me who like to tinker with their own custom controller configurations, and they upload them to Steam. And you can go around the community and grab the one that you like. And heck, I would strongly suggest even getting some of them, testing them out, and if you find the one that really works for you, just modify it a bit. Make it your own. Because in the end, the controller is so goddamn configurable that it is just a pity not to make it the way that you would really like to play the game. Now, of course, that is something that a couple of people could consider a downside. So why can't you just jump into a game and have everything mapped like a 360? Well, you kind of can. You can choose the default templates for the controller to act as exactly as a 360 pad. Though I would strongly not suggest it, you can do it. But it's just so much better if you finally find the correct configuration for your game and take advantage of the controller itself. So yeah, about the controller, you also get haptic feedback on almost everything that this controller has. You get it on touchpads, you get it on triggers, you can even get it on the thumbstick and the buttons. Also, you can enable the haptics on the gyro, though I wouldn't actually recommend it, but that's a personal preference. You can enable it, test it out, and see how you feel. See if it's working out for you. You can even set the haptic sensitivity to low, medium, high, or off, so you can configure it really the way you like it to give you feedback on what you're doing with the controller. So that's really nice, really nice. Also, something to keep in mind is that the two trackpads can be reconfigured to act as basically whatever you like. You can have them set as mouse, you can have them as directional pads, button pads, you can make them emulate joysticks, you can make them emulate joystick mouse movement, which basically means that you will be using the trackpad as a mouse. But the input that the game gets is kind of like a joystick, so the game thinks that you're moving around with a joystick, but you're actually using the trackpad as a mouse, which is really great when it works. Unfortunately, Alien Isolation does not work that well with it, but the other games I've tested, it works just fine. So that's another great feature of this highly configurable controller. So, to sum it up on this long video, oh my. If you're still with me, then it means that you have been listening to me rambling about for a long time now. Thank you very much. So, the build quality of the Steam controller, what do I think of it? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I find nothing that I really hate about it. I like the matte finish, though I'm not particularly a fan of the glossy parts of the controller, though they're a little so. So it's overall it's very good. And the only big thing I gotta rant about are the height of the ABXY buttons and the start and select buttons. I would change it so that they would be a little bit more higher to my liking, but that's just a personal preference. The Steam control's features are pretty much as you would get on any other controller, like a 360. Well, plus it has the back paddles, it has dual stage triggers on it, and the trackpads. Plus, of course, the haptic feedback on almost any button on the controller. And of course the gyroscope, which really is a game changer for all the FPS and third-person shooter games. Well, I don't understand why Valve didn't actually advertise it as much as it did. I only got to know about it once the first initial controllers were released, so I've got no idea why they wouldn't advertise it more, but this really is a game changer. It's a nice feature. The controls, once you get this controller set up, are excellent. The precision is way better than on any other controller on the market, though it still is not as precise as keyboard and mouse, which is, again, to be expected. It's a controller. The ease of use, setting the whole thing up, well, it used to be a hassle, but now it's a little bit less of a hassle. The community making so many templates and the developers having all the tools necessary for them to make their own templates, which are recommended for their games, for Steam controls. It's actually pretty nice now. You don't see many games where you just don't have any templates at all. But in the end, I think it's the controller itself is more marketed towards a user who really wants to configure the controller itself and get the maximum out of the thing. Because as I said, it's kind of like a blank slate when you first start it up. So you really need to get it configured the way you like it. Also, one thing that has stirred up quite a controversy over the Steam controller is the fact that you need Steam to actually configure the controller. Otherwise, it will act as keyboard and mouse. Well, you can use the controller with non-Steam games. You just need to use the big picture, add the game to your library, and then start the game through the big picture, and then you will have the big picture overlay applied, and then you can still configure it for the game. The game I tested out was OpenMW, which is an open source re-implementation of the Morrowind, which worked pretty well, I must say. So the controller can be used to play basically any game that you would run on your PC nonetheless. So for 60 euros, it was definitely worth the investment from my part at least, as I was looking for a replacement for my Logitech Chillstream. I think that pretty much covers it all. If you have any questions, leave them down to the comments and let me know. If you think that this controller might be something that you would be interested in, or if you already have this controller in your house, what do you think of it? From my side, thank you all for watching this very long video, and have a great evening.